When silence broke the room, the day had started like any other for Keanu Reeves, quiet, calm, and grounded in the simple routine he always followed. The morning sun touched the side of his Los Angeles home, casting long shadows across the floor. He made coffee, watched the world outside move slowly, and let his thoughts drift. His life had always been defined by humility and restraint, even when fame tried to break through his peace. He valued the silence, the ordinary, and the sincerity that most people overlooked. That afternoon, the air was unusually still. Keanu sat on the couch, lost in an old photo album filled with memories from movie sets. One photo made him pause. It was from the film Speed. Him and Sandra Bullock laughing between takes, her head thrown back, his eyes calm but deeply alive. They had been young, hopeful, and unaware that the world would hold on to that chemistry forever. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, soft, hesitant. He knew the rhythm instantly. It was Sandra. She always knocked like that, as if asking permission to disturb the silence. He opened the door and found her standing there, wearing a pale blue sweater, hair tied loosely, eyes full of warmth and something else. Maybe sadness. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried weight beneath it. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he replied. She walked in without waiting for an invitation. She didn't need one. After decades of friendship, she knew she belonged there. They sat down, and for a moment neither spoke. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was full of shared memories, unfinished sentences, and a bond that didn't need explaining. "You've been quiet lately," Sandra finally said. "You missed the charity event last week." Keanu looked down at his hands. "I didn't feel ready to be around people." She nodded, understanding instantly. Loss had shaped both of them. They had seen how fragile everything could be, and sometimes words only made things worse. So she leaned back and said, "Then let's not talk about the world. Let's just sit here." That simple sentence felt like warmth returning to a cold room. They talked about old memories, the times when laughter was easy, and the world hadn't yet demanded so much of them. Sandra teased him about his long hair, and he smiled. Really smiled. The kind that made his eyes light up like they used to. Hours passed without notice. Outside, the daylight faded into the golden hue of evening. Sandra had moved closer on the couch, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. It wasn't planned. It just felt right. It was comfort. Two souls who had weathered storms finding a moment of stillness together. Keanu hesitated for a second, but didn't move. His hand instinctively brushed a strand of hair from her face. She looked up, eyes gentle but deep. There was no need for words. Their connection had always been something rare, not born from desire but from understanding. The kind of bond that doesn't fade with time. The sound of the front door unlocking broke the silence like a shattering glass. Both turned toward the hallway. And there she was, Ana de Armas. She stood frozen, holding a small paper bag. Probably dinner she'd picked up on the way. Her eyes shifted from Keanu's face to Sandra's head resting on his shoulder. The quiet of the room turned heavy, charged, and electric. "Anna," Keanu said quickly, his voice calm but edged with shock. Her expression was unreadable. Calm, too calm. She didn't raise her voice or drop the bag. She just stared at them, the kind of stare that said everything words couldn't. Sandra immediately sat up, her hand slipping away from Keanu's arm. Her face went pale. "It's not what it looks like," Sandra said quietly, though she knew how weak that line sounded. Anna's lips curved into a small, polite smile. "I didn't say anything," but her voice trembled slightly. She stepped inside, placed the bag gently on the kitchen counter, and looked at Keanu again. "You didn't tell me you were expecting company." Keanu's throat felt dry. "It wasn't planned. She just came by." Anna nodded, pretending to believe it. "Of course," she said softly. "You two have history." There was no anger in her tone, and somehow that made it worse. It was disappointment disguised as calm. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. "I think I should go." Keanu took a step forward, but she moved back. "Please don't," he said, voice low. "It's not Keanu," she interrupted gently. "It's fine, really," but it wasn't fine. Every second of her calmness was a storm barely contained. She turned to leave, but Keanu's voice stopped her. "Anna, wait!" She paused near the door, her hand on the handle. "Don't make this harder," she whispered. "Just listen to me," he said, his tone breaking for the first time. "She's my friend. She's always been there when no one else was. We weren't—" Anna turned slightly, her eyes meeting his. "I know she's your friend," she said. "But sometimes friendship looks a lot like love when you're the one watching from the outside." The line hung in the air like smoke, soft but burning. She walked out before either of them could say another word. The sound of the door closing felt final, like something precious had just cracked beyond repair. Sandra sat quietly, guilt written all over her face. "Keanu, I should go," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to—" "You didn't do anything wrong," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes fixed on the floor. "I just didn't see this coming." Sandra stood, her movement slow. "She loves you, Keanu," she said. You can see it in her eyes. He didn't respond. Because deep down, he knew she was right. Anna loved him. And now, that love might have just been broken by something innocent, yet impossible to explain. The night stretched long. Hours passed in silence again, but it wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy with regret and confusion. Keanu sat alone after Sandra left, replaying the moment over and over. The look on Anna's face, the quiet pain behind her calmness, the words she hadn't said but he could feel. He thought about calling her, explaining everything, but every time he picked up the phone, he couldn't find the right words. What could he say that would make sense? How could he prove that something so simple, so human, wasn't what it looked like? Outside, the rain began to fall, light at first, then steady, tapping against the windows like a reminder that time was still moving. He stared at the photo of him and Sandra again, and this time he didn't see laughter. He saw the beginning of something that had just torn another part of his life apart. He finally whispered to himself, almost like a confession, "How did everything change so fast?" He didn't know that at that very moment. Anna was sitting in her car, parked just a few blocks away, staring at the rain too. Her fingers trembled against the steering wheel, and her heart felt heavier than she wanted to admit. She didn't hate him. She couldn't. But something inside her had shifted, and she didn't know if she could go back to pretending that everything between them was untouched by the shadow of someone else. The storm outside grew stronger, and inside both their hearts. Another kind of storm had just begun. The storm that followed, the morning after the silence, felt heavier than the night before. Keanu barely slept. He sat by the window, watching the rain dry into soft mist over the city skyline. Los Angeles had that strange stillness after a storm, the kind that looked peaceful but carried the memory of chaos underneath. He felt the same inside. Anna had not called, not a single message. The last thing she said kept echoing in his head. Sometimes friendship looks a lot like love when you're the one watching from the outside. He didn't know if it was anger or heartbreak, but it stayed with him like a weight pressing down on his chest. He wanted to reach out, but something held him back. Maybe guilt, maybe fear that anything he said would only make it worse. So he did what he always did when life hurt too much. He went quiet. By noon, the phone finally buzzed. But it wasn't Anna. It was Sandra. "You haven't talked to her yet, have you?" Her voice was calm, almost knowing. Keanu leaned against the counter. "No, I don't know what to say. You don't have to know," she said softly. "You just have to be honest," he sighed. "That's the problem. Honesty hurts people sometimes." "Not being honest hurts worse," she said. "Believe me, I've learned that the hard way." Keanu smiled faintly through the exhaustion. Sandra always had a way of sounding calm, even when her own heart was breaking. He could hear the compassion in her voice, the kind that came from a life that had seen both light and loss. "You think she'll listen?" he asked. "If she loves you, she will," Sandra replied. "But you have to reach out before silence starts building walls you can't break." He nodded quietly. After hanging up, he picked up his phone again and typed slowly. "Hey, can we talk?" He stared at the message for several minutes before hitting send. It felt too small to carry everything he wanted to say, but it was a start. Minutes turned to hours. There was no reply. By evening, his chest felt tight with anxiety. He tried to distract himself by reading scripts, cooking, even walking around the house. But everything led back to that moment when Anna stood at the door, her calm eyes hiding pain. Meanwhile, across town, Anna sat in her living room, staring at her phone too. She saw the message hours ago, but couldn't bring herself to respond. Part of her wanted to run to him, hear his explanation, and let her heart believe him. But another part whispered doubts, the part that remembered seeing Sandra's head, resting on his shoulder, the ease in their closeness, and the quiet comfort that only long years could build. She wasn't jealous of Sandra. She respected her deeply. But seeing them together had opened an old wound, the fear that no matter how much she gave, she would always be a temporary part of someone's forever story. Her best friend, Lucia, called that night. "You've been quiet," she said. "What happened?" Anna hesitated. "I saw something I shouldn't have." "Him and Sandra?" Lucia asked softly. Anna was surprised. "You knew?" "Everyone sees it," Lucia said gently. "The way he talks about her, the softness when her name comes up. But it doesn't mean he loves you less. It's just, she's part of his story. Before you." Anna didn't reply. The truth was Lucia was right, and that truth hurt more than anything. The next morning, Keanu finally decided to go see her. No calls, no texts, just action. He needed to face it. He drove through the city with quiet determination, the radio off, the hum of the car, the only sound. When he reached her apartment, he hesitated for a full minute before knocking. She opened the door slowly. Her eyes looked tired but not angry. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," she replied. They stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say next. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment smelled of coffee and jasmine candles. It was calm, warm, but there was a certain distance in the air, like two souls who knew each other too well but didn't know how to bridge the silence. "I'm sorry," he said first, "for how it looked, for not calling right away, for everything." Anna sat down, her hands clasped. "I don't think you did anything wrong," she said slowly. "I just realized something." Keanu frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She looked up at him. "You and Sandra share something rare, something that doesn't go away. I saw it in that moment, Keanu. It wasn't about the way you held her. It was about the peace on your face. That kind of peace doesn't happen with everyone." "It doesn't mean I don't love you," he said firmly. "I know," she said softly. "But maybe it means part of you still lives somewhere I can't reach." Her words hit him like quiet thunder, not loud, but deep and irreversible. He sat down across from her, his voice trembling. "You mean you want to walk away?" Anna's eyes filled with tears. She tried to hold back. "I don't know what I want. I just know that love shouldn't feel like waiting for a part of someone to come back to you." Keanu reached for her hand, but she gently pulled away. "I need time," she whispered. "To think, to breathe, to understand what I saw and what I feel." He nodded slowly. "Take all the time you need." The conversation ended there, but the silence that followed said everything words couldn't. He left quietly, the sound of the door closing behind him echoing through his heart. As he drove back home, the sun began to set. The sky burned orange and pink, and for the first time in a long while, Keanu felt small. Fame, success, wisdom, none of it protected him from heartbreak. Love made him human again. When he reached home, the lights were still off. He walked into the living room and saw something unexpected. Sandra was there, sitting on the same couch, holding a small note in her hand. "How did you get in?" he asked softly. "You gave me the key, remember? Years ago when I watched your dog while you were filming, she said with a faint smile. Then she held up the note. You left this behind once, in my trailer years ago. I never showed it to you until now. Keanu frowned. What note? She unfolded it carefully. The paper was old, the ink slightly faded. She read aloud, her voice trembling. Dear Sandra, sometimes I think about what life would be like if timing was kinder. You've always been the calm in my chaos. Even when the world shouted my name, your silence was home. Maybe in another life we would have found each other sooner. The room went still. Keanu didn't remember writing it, but the words sounded like him. The kind of confession he'd once been too afraid to say out loud. Sandra folded the note again and looked at him. You wrote that during the lake house. I found it behind the mirror in my trailer. I kept it because it said everything we never talked about. He stood there frozen, unsure what to feel. Guilt, longing, regret, all mixed into one. Why now? He asked quietly. Because seeing what happened last night made me realize something, she said. We've both been holding on to the past. Maybe it's time to stop pretending that nothing ever existed. Keanu's heart pounded. You think we should have been together? I think we missed our chance, she whispered. And maybe we keep hurting others because of it. He looked at her, eyes heavy with emotion. So what now? She took a deep breath. Now, you have to decide what peace means to you, and who you can truly share it with. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance again, as if the storm had never really ended. Keanu sat down beside her, the note between them like a fragile truth. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of unspoken words pressing hard against the walls of his heart. And somewhere, in another part of the city, Anna stared at her phone again, scrolling through old photos of them, smiling, laughing, unaware of how fragile love can be when the past still lingers between every heartbeat. The night was quiet again, but this time the silence no longer brought peace. It carried a question neither of them could answer. The distance between hearts, the next few days felt endless. Keanu kept his phone close, waiting for Anna's message that never came. Mornings turned to nights in quiet repetition. He still went through the motions, workouts, coffee, calls from his agent, but inside, everything felt hollow. His mind kept circling the same moments like waves crashing against the same rock. Anna's trembling voice, Sandra's note, the question that none of them had the courage to answer. What did peace really mean? And who belonged in it? By the fourth day, Keanu couldn't take the silence anymore. He sat on his porch, the sky, dim with fading sunlight, and whispered to himself, I have to fix this. It wasn't just about love now, it was about truth, the kind he had avoided for too long. He started driving toward Anna's apartment again, rehearsing what he might say. Halfway there, he stopped at a small park, the same park where they had taken their first long walk together. The memory hit him like a flash. Anna had worn a soft white dress, barefoot on the grass, laughing as he tried to take a candid photo of her. That was the day he realized she saw through him. The fame, the solitude, all of it. She saw the quiet man behind the actor. He sat on the same bench now, empty-handed, and felt the ache of how easily love could turn into distance. As he stared at the trees, his phone buzzed. It was Anna. I've been thinking. Can we meet? His heart skipped a beat. He typed quickly. Yes. When? Tonight. Same cafe as before. 8 p.m. He didn't even hesitate. By the time he arrived, the cafe was nearly empty. The golden light from hanging lamps painted everything soft and nostalgic. Anna sat by the window, a cup of tea in her hands, looking out at the street. She looked calm, but her eyes told another story. They met his gaze as he walked in. Thanks for coming, she said softly. I would have come anywhere, he replied. They sat across from each other, and for a few seconds, neither spoke. The hum of quiet music filled the space between them. Finally, Anna looked down and said, I needed time to understand what I saw that night. Keanu nodded. And did you? A little, she said. I realized it wasn't jealousy. It was fear. Fear that your heart might still be searching for something you lost years ago. He leaned forward. Anna, I don't compare you to anyone. What I have with you isn't what I had with Sandra. It's different. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. But that's just it, Keanu. She's not gone from your heart. I saw it. And maybe that's not a bad thing. But it means I'm standing next to a love that never fully ended. Keanu's hands tightened slightly on his cup. You're wrong, he said quietly. That love was never about possession. It was about care. I let go of her a long time ago. Did you? She asked, her voice almost breaking. Because when she read that note, I saw your face. You weren't surprised, Keanu. You were remembering? He closed his eyes for a second, realizing the truth in her words. He had been remembering the laughter, the shared silences, the calmness that came only with Sandra. I can't erase what she means to me, he admitted. But I don't want to. She's a part of who I became. She helped me grow into the man you fell in love with. Anna looked away, tears threatening to spill. And maybe that's the hardest part. Because every time I love you, I feel like I'm loving the version someone else helped build. He didn't know how to respond. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, hesitant but full of sincerity. Then let me build something with you now, he said. Not out of the past, out of today. She looked at him, and for a moment, her walls lowered. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, a soft voice interrupted. Keanu. They turned. Sandra stood at the entrance. She looked surprised, not angry, just uncertain. She held a small brown envelope in her hand. I didn't mean to interrupt, she said gently. I just needed to return something. Anna tensed instantly. Keanu stood, trying to ease the tension. What is it? Sandra stepped forward slowly. Your letter? The one I found. I think it belongs to you now. She placed the envelope on the table. Her eyes met Anna's for a brief second. Calm, kind, but filled with quiet sadness. Anna spoke first. You don't have to explain. I should, though, Sandra said softly. You walked in that night and saw something you weren't supposed to. I would have misunderstood, too. But what you saw wasn't two people in love. It was two people who missed peace. And sometimes we reach for what feels safe when we forget how to breathe. Anna's eyes softened slightly. There was truth in Sandra's tone, not defensive, not emotional, just deeply human. Keanu said nothing. He watched the two women he cared about face each other with a kind of quiet grace he hadn't expected. Sandra continued, I've known Keanu for decades, and yes, there was a time when maybe we could have been something. But we didn't, and maybe that's exactly why we still care. Because we never broke each other. Anna blinked, her eyes lowering. Then why did you keep the letter? Sandra smiled faintly. Because it reminded me that someone once saw me the way I wanted to be seen, kind, not perfect, just human. We all hold on to little things like that, but I think it's time I let this one go. She pushed the envelope toward Keanu and nodded. You don't owe me anything, Key, but you do owe yourself clarity, and you owe her the truth. Then she turned to leave. Sandra, he said, his voice rough. Thank you. She smiled, small, tired, but peaceful. Be happy, both of you, she said before walking out. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The cafe felt suddenly too quiet. Anna looked at the envelope, then back at Keanu. What are you going to do with it? She asked. He opened it carefully. The same folded note stared back at him, the words that had caused so much pain. He looked at them one last time, then tore the paper slowly in half. Anna's eyes widened slightly. Keanu, he shook his head. I can't keep holding on to things that don't belong to this moment. I want to start again, if you'll let me. She exhaled deeply, emotion catching in her throat. You really mean that? With everything I have, he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes filled with 1,000 unspoken thoughts. Then, slowly, she nodded. Then start by walking me home. They left the cafe together under the city lights. The rain had stopped, and the streets shimmered faintly with reflections of passing cars. Anna walked close beside him, silent but no longer distant. Keanu felt something he hadn't in days, a fragile sense of hope. But just as they reached her building, a voice called from behind. "Keanu!" They both turned. A man stepped out from the shadows, tall, wearing a dark coat, his face serious. "My name's Daniel. I'm Anna's friend," he said calmly. "We need to talk." Anna froze. Keanu's expression hardened. "About what?" Daniel looked at Anna, then back at Keanu. "About what you left behind, and what you don't know yet." The air went cold again. Anna's face turned pale, and Keanu's heartbeat quickened. The peace they had just begun to rebuild was already cracking. The truth beneath silence, the night had turned colder than usual. A thin breeze brushed past the streetlights as Keanu stood facing Daniel, the stranger who had suddenly appeared from the shadows. Anna's expression said everything: surprise, confusion, and something deeper that Keanu couldn't quite read. She knew this man, that much was clear, but the tension in her eyes told him this meeting wasn't simple. "Daniel," Keanu said slowly, his voice steady but cautious. "What is this about?" Daniel took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "It's about something she didn't tell you," he said. "Something that might change how you see everything." Anna's voice broke the silence. "Daniel, stop. This isn't your place. You should have told him yourself," Daniel replied quietly. "He deserves the truth." Keanu's heart started pounding. "Anna, what is he talking about?" She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "Not here," she whispered. But Daniel wasn't finished. "She wasn't just hurt by what happened with Sandra," he said. "She's been carrying something from before that. Something that connects all of this more than you realize." Keanu's jaw tightened. "If you have something to say it clearly." Daniel's eyes softened for a moment. "She was in love before she met you, Keanu, deeply, and she never really got closure from it. The man she loved died on a set 2 years ago. She watched it happen. It was a stunt gone wrong. Since then, she's been afraid of letting anyone that close again, especially someone like you, someone who reminds her of what she lost." Keanu froze. He turned to Anna, disbelief flickering across his face. "Is that true?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "But it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" he asked, voice low but shaking slightly. Anna took a slow breath, steadying herself. "His name was Marco. He was a stunt coordinator. We worked together for years. He was kind, brave, humble, a lot like you. We were planning to move in together right before the accident. I saw it happen. I saw the wire snap. I heard the sound when he hit the floor. And since that day, I've been scared of love. Not because I don't want it, but because I don't want to lose it again." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and Keanu felt something inside him shatter. He finally understood the quiet sadness behind her eyes, the hesitation in her love, the way she flinched whenever someone got too close. "Anna," he whispered. She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "When I met you, I didn't expect anything. You were gentle, patient, and I started to believe maybe love didn't have to end in tragedy. But that night, seeing you and Sandra, it pulled me back into the fear that I'll always be the outsider to someone else's story. That I'll never be enough." Keanu's chest ached. He stepped forward, his voice firm but tender. "You are enough, and you always were. I didn't know you were carrying that much pain. I wish you'd told me." "I tried," she said softly. "But every time I wanted to, I couldn't find the words. I didn't want your pity." "It's not pity," he said. "It's love." For a long moment, they just stood there, two people caught between grief and understanding, trying to rebuild something fragile in the middle of broken truth. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice calm but tired. "She's been seeing me for therapy sessions," he said. "I'm not her ex. I'm her counselor." Keanu blinked in surprise. "You're her therapist?" Anna nodded quietly. "He helped me after Marco's accident. I didn't want you to know because I didn't want you to see me as damaged." Keanu's expression softened instantly. "You're not damaged," he said. "You're human. You're strong enough to face what most people would run from." The tension finally eased. Daniel gave a small nod, almost in approval. "Then maybe now you can both start being honest, not just with each other, but with yourselves." He turned to leave, but before walking away, he said gently, "Sometimes love doesn't heal you until you stop pretending you're not hurt." When he was gone, the silence between Keanu and Anna was thick, but different. No longer heavy with secrets, just filled with emotions too big for words. Anna wiped her tears, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't expect you to stay after hearing that." Keanu took her hands gently. "I'm not the kind of man who leaves when things get difficult. I've been through loss too, Anna. You're not alone in this." She looked up at him, eyes searching his face for any sign of judgment. There was none. Only quiet understanding. They walked up to her apartment together, not speaking much, but every step felt like a bridge, slowly being rebuilt. Inside, she lit a candle, the soft glow wrapping the room in calm light. Keanu sat beside her on the couch. "You never talk much about your past," she said suddenly. He smiled faintly. "Because it hurts sometimes. Not in a bad way, just in a way that reminds me how fragile everything is." "You lost people too," she said softly. "Yeah," he replied. "People I loved. People I never got to say goodbye to." She nodded slowly, the connection between them deepening in silence. They weren't two perfect souls. They were two broken ones, learning how to breathe again. After a long pause, Anna leaned against his shoulder. "Maybe that's why we found each other," she whispered. "To remind ourselves that healing doesn't mean forgetting." He looked down at her, the candlelight reflecting in her eyes. "No," he said gently. "Healing means remembering, but without letting the pain control the story." For the first time in days, she smiled. A real, fragile smile that reached her eyes. The moment felt peaceful, almost sacred. But peace, in their world, never lasted long. The next morning, Keanu's phone rang early. It was Sandra. Her voice was shaky, almost panicked. "Keanu, something happened," she said quickly. "There was an accident on set." His stomach dropped. "What kind of accident?" "A camera rig fell during a rehearsal. They're saying someone got hurt. Anna was visiting the studio this morning. She was supposed to meet the director about a new role." For a second, the world went silent. Keanu's heart stopped. "Which hospital?" he asked, already grabbing his keys. "St. Vincent's," she said. "They just took her there." He didn't say another word. He was out the door before the call ended. The streets blurred past as he drove faster than he ever had before, memories of their conversations spinning in his head like broken film, her laughter, her tears, her words. Healing means remembering, but without letting the pain control the story. Now, the story might be repeating itself. When he reached the hospital, he ran through the glass doors, breathless, desperate. The nurse at the desk looked up as he leaned forward. "Ana de Armas," he said urgently. "Where is she?" The nurse checked the record, then looked up slowly. "Room 214, second floor." He didn't wait. He took the stairs two at a time, his heart pounding. When he reached the hallway, he saw Sandra standing outside a door, her face pale. "She's stable," Sandra said quickly, "but she's unconscious. They said she hit her head." Keanu exhaled in relief, though the fear still gripped him. He stepped into the room quietly. Anna lay on the bed, pale but peaceful. A faint bruise near her temple, her hair scattered over the pillow. Machines hummed softly beside her. He sat down beside her, took her hand gently, and whispered, "You're not leaving me like this. Not now." His thumb brushed against her wrist, feeling the faint pulse beneath her skin. He stayed like that for hours, unmoving, whispering small things she couldn't hear. Promises, regrets, confessions. When the doctor finally came in, he said she would wake up soon. "She's strong," he said. Keanu smiled faintly. "I know." As the night deepened, Keanu fell asleep beside her bed, still holding her hand. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping softly against the hospital window. But somewhere between those drops and the faint beeping of the monitor, Anna's fingers twitched, her eyes opened, and the first word she whispered, barely audible, was his name. When the heart remembers, the soft beeping of the monitor echoed through the quiet hospital room. Outside, the rain had slowed to a faint drizzle, leaving streaks of water on the window that caught the faint city lights. Keanu stirred in his chair, his head resting against his arm, still holding Anna's hand loosely. He had fallen asleep like that, waiting, praying, remembering every word she said before everything changed. A faint whisper broke the silence. Keanu. His eyes opened instantly. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. But when he looked up, he saw her, Anna, awake. Her eyes half open, her lips trembling as she tried to smile. He leaned forward immediately, his heart pounding with relief. "Hey," he said softly, voice cracking a little. "Hey, you're okay. You're safe." She blinked slowly, her gaze searching his face as if trying to confirm he was real. "You stayed?" He smiled faintly. "I wasn't going anywhere." Her hand tightened weakly around his. "I remember the light, and then nothing. I thought—" She stopped, her voice faltering. "Shh," he said gently. "Don't talk about that. It's over. You're here now." Her eyes filled with tears. "I heard someone call my name," she whispered. "I thought it was him, Marco." Keanu's heart clenched. He squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe it was just your mind trying to protect you. Sometimes it gives us what we need most when we're scared." She nodded faintly. "And what did you need?" "You," he said without hesitation. "I needed you to wake up." The words hung in the air, quiet, but full of everything he had been holding back. Love, fear, gratitude, hope. Anna's eyes softened, and she managed a small, tired smile. "I'm here." For a long time, they didn't speak. He sat by her side, watching her breathe, feeling a peace he hadn't known in weeks. When the doctor came in, he said she would recover, though she needed rest and observation for a few days. Sandra arrived later with a bag of fresh clothes and food. When she saw Anna awake, she smiled warmly. "You gave us quite a scare," she said, her voice gentle. Anna smiled weakly. "Sorry, I didn't mean to cause all this drama." Sandra laughed softly. "Trust me, life doesn't ask for permission before giving us drama." Keanu watched them talk, and something inside him shifted. A quiet realization. There was no jealousy, no tension, just compassion between them. Somehow, the storm that once divided their lives had softened into something resembling peace. When Sandra left, she squeezed Keanu's shoulder. "Take care of her," she said softly. "I will," he promised. Later that evening, as the lights dimmed and the hospital grew quiet, Anna turned to him again. "Do you ever wonder why people meet when they do?" He thought for a moment. "All the time. I think timing isn't about coincidence. It's about readiness. We meet people when our hearts can finally understand what they mean." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why we met. Maybe I wasn't ready before." He looked at her, eyes soft but steady. Maybe we both weren't. The next morning, Anna was moved to a recovery suite with a window view. She looked stronger already, color slowly returning to her cheeks. Keanu stayed by her side, reading to her, making her laugh, watching over her every movement. But one evening, as the sunset painted the room gold, Anna's expression changed. Thoughtful. "Distant, Keanu," she said quietly. "When I was unconscious, I saw something. I don't know if it was real or just a dream, but it felt real." He turned to her. "What did you see?" She took a deep breath. "I saw Marco. He was standing somewhere bright, smiling at me, and he said something that keeps echoing in my mind." "What did he say?" He said, "You're allowed to love again." Keanu's throat tightened. He couldn't speak for a moment. "I think," she continued softly, "I've been living like my heart was a room with the door half closed, afraid that if I opened it again, something bad would happen. But maybe I've been wrong." He reached for her hand, his voice trembling slightly. "Anna, no one can replace what you lost. Not me, not anyone. But love doesn't erase the past. It helps carry it more gently." She looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. "And you'd still want to carry that with me?" He smiled, a slow, steady smile that reached his eyes. "I already am." Her fingers brushed his cheek, soft and warm. "You really are too good to me." "No," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to love you the way you deserve." That night, after she fell asleep, Keanu stepped out into the hospital corridor. He leaned against the wall, exhausted but calm. Sandra called again to check on them, and he updated her gently. "Sounds like she's healing," Sandra said. "She is," he replied, "and maybe so am I." "You both needed this. Not the accident, but the clarity," she said. "Sometimes pain is the only way we learn to be honest with ourselves." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally understand that." "Good," Sandra said softly. "Because you deserve peace too, Key." When he hung up, he looked out the window. The rain had stopped completely. The sky was clear, the stars faint but visible. For the first time in a long while, he felt hope. 2 days later, Anna was discharged. Keanu drove her home, the soft hum of the car wrapping them in quiet comfort. She leaned her head against the window, watching the passing lights, and whispered, "Everything looks different now." "Because you're seeing it without fear," he said. When they reached her apartment, she hesitated before getting out. "Would you stay for a bit?" He nodded. "Of course." Inside, the air felt calm, familiar. She sat on the couch while he made tea. When he brought it to her, she smiled. "You even remembered how I like it." "2 spoons of sugar," he said. "You're predictable." "And you're patient," she replied, her smile widening. For a while, they just talked. About movies, books, the small moments that made life beautiful again. It wasn't dramatic or intense. It was gentle, real. Then, as the night grew quiet, Anna stood and walked toward the balcony. She looked out at the city lights, the wind brushing through her hair. Keanu joined her, standing close but not touching. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think love was something that either broke you or saved you, but now I think it's both." He looked at her. "And which one am I?" She smiled faintly, turning to meet his eyes. "You're the one who showed me it's okay to live again." He reached out slowly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you're the one who reminded me that peace isn't about silence. It's about being with someone who understands your quiet." For a long time, they stood there, 2 souls who had walked through storms, now learning to stand in calm light again. But as the clock struck midnight, Keanu's phone buzzed. He frowned, pulling it from his pocket. It was an unknown number, but the message made his heart stop. "Mr. Reeves, this is Dr. Daniel Cole. We need to talk. It's about Anna. There's something urgent I discovered in her scans." His fingers tightened around the phone. His heart began to race again. He looked at Anna, still standing by the balcony, peaceful and smiling under the city lights. He whispered to himself, "Not again." The light that stayed the message on Keanu's phone blurred for a moment as he stared at it, frozen. His chest tightened, a familiar dread rising, the kind that came before everything changed. He looked up from the screen to where Anna stood on the balcony, her face peaceful, her eyes lost in the glow of the city below. He couldn't bring himself to tell her yet. Not until he knew what urgent meant. "Anna," he said softly, pocketing the phone. "I need to step out for a few minutes." "I'll be right back," she turned, smiling. "Everything okay?" He forced a calm nod. "Yeah, just a quick call." She didn't question it. "Don't be long," she said gently. He stepped out into the hallway and called the number. Daniel picked up immediately, his tone low and urgent. "Keanu, I didn't mean to worry you, but there's something in Anna's scans that the doctors missed at first." Keanu's pulse quickened. "Missed? What are you talking about?" "When she hit her head, the trauma triggered a hidden aneurysm," Daniel explained. "It's small, but if it ruptures, it could be fatal." "She needs surgery soon." For a moment, Keanu couldn't breathe. He pressed his palm against the wall, closing his eyes. "How soon?" "Within 72 hours, Daniel said quietly. "It's not something we can ignore." "But she doesn't know yet. I wanted you to be there when we tell her." "Where are you?" Keanu asked, already moving toward the elevator. "Still at the hospital. Can you bring her in tonight?" "Yes," Keanu said firmly. "I'll bring her now." He hung up, stood still for a moment, and took a deep breath before going back inside. Anna turned toward him, her smile fading when she saw his expression. "What happened?" He hesitated, his voice gentle. "The doctor called. They found something in your scans." He just wants to check again to make sure you're completely okay. Her eyes flickered with worry, but she stayed calm. So soon? Yeah, he said softly. Just to be safe. She nodded slowly. Okay, let's go. They drove through the quiet city, the night unusually still. Neither of them spoke much. The sound of the tires on wet pavement filled the silence. Anna kept looking out the window, her hand resting lightly on her lap. When they reached the hospital, Daniel was waiting near the entrance. His eyes met Keanu's, calm but serious. Inside the consultation room, Daniel explained everything gently. Anna listened quietly, her face unreadable. When he finished, she sat still for a long time. So, she said finally, her voice low, "It's not guaranteed, is it?" Daniel hesitated. "The surgery is delicate, but success rates are high. You're strong, Anna. You can come through this." She looked down at her hands, then back up at Keanu. "Can I have a minute with him?" Daniel nodded and stepped out. For a while, neither of them spoke. Keanu sat across from her, his heart breaking at the calmness on her face. "You knew before I did," she said softly. He nodded. "I didn't want to scare you," she gave a small smile. "You can't protect me from everything, Keanu. Life doesn't work that way." "I know," he whispered, "but I'll do anything to keep you safe." She reached across the table, taking his hand. "You already have. You gave me peace when I thought I'd forgotten how to feel it." He squeezed her hand tightly. "We'll get through this. I promise. And if we don't?" she asked gently. He looked into her eyes. "Then I'll still be right here. Wherever here is." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "You always say the right things." "No," he said, voice trembling. "I just say what I mean." That night she was admitted for observation. Keanu refused to leave her side. He sat with her through every test, every moment of waiting. When the nurses came in to prepare her for surgery the next morning, he helped her tie her hair back, his hands shaking slightly. "You're shaking," she said softly. "Because I'm scared," he admitted. She smiled weakly. "Me too, but at least we're scared together." Before they wheeled her away, she reached up, her hand brushing his face. "If I fall asleep and don't wake up, promise me something." "Don't say that," he whispered. "Promise me," she insisted gently. He nodded, tears threatening to fall. "What do you want me to promise?" "That you'll keep living the way you make others live, with kindness. That you'll keep believing in love even if it hurts. That you won't disappear into silence again." He closed his eyes, pressing her hand to his cheek. "I promise," she smiled, her voice barely a whisper. "Then I can rest easy." They took her away then, and for the next few hours, Keanu sat in the waiting room, time stretching endlessly. Sandra arrived quietly, sitting beside him without saying a word. He was grateful for her presence, the calmness she always brought. Hours later, the surgeon finally came out. His expression was tired but kind. "She's stable," he said. "It went well. We removed the aneurysm. She'll need rest, but she's out of danger." Keanu exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. His eyes closed, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Thank you," he whispered. When he finally saw her again, she was pale but peaceful. He took her hand and whispered, "You did it." Her eyes fluttered open slightly, and she gave him the faintest smile. "You didn't break your promise yet," she murmured. "Never will," he said. Days passed. Anna recovered slowly, her strength returning bit by bit. Each day, Keanu read to her, made her laugh. And sometimes they just sat in silence. Not the kind filled with fear anymore, but the kind that meant peace. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the hospital window, she turned to him. "You know what I realized?" "What?" he asked. "That love isn't just about who stays," she said softly. "It's about who refuses to leave when everything falls apart." He smiled. "Then we're both guilty." She laughed quietly, her voice soft and real. Weeks later, Anna was finally discharged. Keanu took her home, and as they walked through her door, everything felt lighter. The city outside buzzed with life again. She placed her hand in his and said, "We made it through another storm." He looked at her, his eyes warm. "And this time, we're not walking out alone." Months passed, and life found its rhythm again. Anna returned to filming. careful but strong, and Keanu, though quiet as always, carried a new peace in his heart. Their love wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Built from pain, healed through patience, and strengthened by truth. Sometimes at night, they sat together on the balcony where it all began. The same city lights, the same quiet wind. She would lean her head against his shoulder, and he would hold her hand. And in that silence, neither needed to say a word. Because some stories didn't need grand endings, only the gentle assurance that love, once found, could survive anything. As the night deepened, Anna whispered, "Do you ever think about him? About Marco?" Keanu nodded. "Sometimes. And when I do, I thank him." "For what?" she asked softly. "For helping you find your way back to love," he said. She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "And I thank Sandra," she said quietly, "for reminding you that peace isn't silence. It's being understood." He looked at her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Then maybe this, right here, is what peace finally looks like." She leaned closer, resting her forehead against his. "No," she whispered. "This is what love looks like." And outside, as the first light of dawn brushed across the sky, the world kept moving, quiet, soft, and full of stories still unwritten.